This is Tales from the Grit, hosted by TPS students. We talk with people from all walks of life to better understand our now and realize our next. Let's get started.
We're here today with Colin DeForrest, founder of I2 Strategies, along with Stephanie Martinez, discussing ways we can make a difference in the lives of individuals experiencing homelessness. So Colin, after working for various cities, you decided to branch out on your own and started I2 Strategies. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, for sure. Great question. I worked for multiple cities. The city of Tacoma, I worked there for over 5 years, was able to start all of their homeless services programs, which is pretty crazy because we're sitting across the street from where I worked. And then I went down to the city of Olympia where they basically asked me, hey, can you do the same stuff that you did in the city of Tacoma? Was great. Was able to do some really innovative things in both the city of Tacoma and the city of Olympia. But as often happens with government work, you start running into walls, right? Mm-hmm. So innovation can be looked at as a great thing, but also innovation can sometimes be looked at as something that's fearful, right? Mm-hmm. Especially to cities, which are oftentimes risk averse. When you get into homelessness, you have to be innovative, right? Mm-hmm. So my company's Innovative Impact Strategies. There's a reason why it's called Innovative Impact Strategies. You know, you want to be innovative, you want to be able to do things that really push the limit. And you truly, with this population, we're talking about humans. So you truly want to be able to do your best work, respond. So Steph can say the same thing. At some point, I love the city of Tacoma, I love the city of Olympia, but at some point, the ties of government work and the restrictions got in the way of the work that I wanted to do, mm-hmm. right? So that's truly one of the main reasons why I started I2 Strategies.
Okay, so that is your why story and why you wanted that to happen.
Yeah.
Or why, okay.
You could say that. I mean, I could go on with why. But yeah, I mean, truly I wanted to continue to push the innovative outside the box ideas that I had. Mm-hmm. With homelessness, there's not a lot of other kind of like systems. So you think about like people that do computer work, you know, like there's historically people have done that. People that do architecture, people that do accounting, people have already kind of laid the groundwork for what success looks like. With homelessness, even today in 2025, there's a lot of questions over what does success look like, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an ability, I'm going to use the word innovative again. There's an ability in this field to be innovative because you're looking around. What I found out when I was at the city of Olympia is there's not a lot of other people doing what I'm doing. And I'm not talking about other people in Olympia or Washington. I'm talking about nationally, mm-hmm. right? And I started hearing that nationally, like, you're doing stuff that other people aren't doing. Mm-hmm. You really need to think about, like, branching out and doing your own thing, which mm-hmm. is totally crazy at the time. And it was something I could not even imagine doing, starting my own company with 3 young children. So that's also my why, because I wanted to be able to be innovative. I wanted to be able to do more than just have these cool little things that I'm doing in this box, this Olympia box or this Tacoma box. I want to take this to a bigger scale. And that's still kind of my why. Mm-hmm. I still want to expand and grow and do more. So.
And I think part of that, though, is consulting gives you the opportunity, or, you know, I2, the opportunity to do more than what you traditionally get to do, like Colin was saying, when you work in city government or in just government work in general, right? So you get to think outside of the box, do those creative ideas. You're contracted to be heard, for your voice to be heard, which is really, for us always, it's like elevating and lifting up the voices of the people living outside, right, to our neighbors and our community. That's really part of a huge reason of the why, right, is like, not only are we giving ourselves a voice to get creative, be innovative, do things that actually work for a very complex problem, but also since we've been doing this for so long, whether it's, you know, working in city government work, whether it's been providing direct services to folks, we know from our interactions and, you know, doing engagement, doing outreach with individuals experiencing homelessness, what could work for folks, right? Because there's no one size fits all solution. And so I think that's also just part of it. And that's also what's just really exciting about getting to do what we do every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So is that why you decided to leave your old job and join Colin in this trailblazing work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it for the beginning of like why I even enjoy this work period, I started in this work in the domestic violence field and working directly with domestic violence survivors. And it got to a point for me personally where domestic violence intersects so much with homelessness. You can't talk about homelessness without talking about DV, without talking about mental health, without talking about substance use, without talking about schools and foster care and things like that, right? They all intersect with each other. And so I very quickly learned that I was getting tired of the system that continues to hold folks that are already experiencing trauma, already in need, have high level of needs, I guess you can say. Really, I started recognizing that domestic violence survivors, folks in general, right, really needed more support and more services than what I could even provide there. And I wanted to get into the system in order to break the system at that time. And so I started just moving forward with working for city government. That's when I had met Colin at the city of Tacoma. And then it kind of just morphed into, then the consulting business started. And then it was, hey, do you want to do more, right? Do you want to do better is our logo actually, and our slogan is just do better in the community. And do you want to be creative and innovative and do more than what we're traditionally used to in the box that we're often put in? And I said, heck yeah, what are we doing? What's our first project? Let's figure this out.
We had many conversations about just the frustration of city government and how do we truly give a voice to the voiceless, which is what Stephanie's talking about. How do we raise these people up and not only just like point at them, but not only give them a voice, but make moves, right? Like make change. Like how do we connect these people to the services that they need? And really to do that, a lot of the innovative work that we talk about is how do we, everybody can say, hear the voice of the voiceless. Do you hear what the homeless need? To truly hear their voice means you're meeting them where they're at. Truly, we live in the gray. Where is the middle? We'll call it compassion and accountability, right? Like, how do we do all of these things? How do we give people love, but also hold them accountable, right? So,
yeah.
And I mean, without even the government, many people view homelessness as a crisis, and some call it a pandemic. There are even those that see it as an inconvenience. You've been quoted as saying homelessness is complex, and can you explain that?
There's a lot of reasons why we have not solved homelessness, right? Complexity is one of the main issues, right? It would be so easy if homelessness was all connected to housing, and that was the only thing, right? Everybody just needs a house. There's definitely truth to that, right? But also there's drug addiction. Also there's mental health, right? Also there's some of the abuses and some of the victimization and the trauma that Stephanie was talking about. And a lot of that falls into also being just a lack of a safety net. When you think about what happens when you stumble in your family, I know in my family, I'm 49. If I stumble, I'm still a mama's boy. My mama's still going to be there for me, right? She's not going to let me fall. A lot of people don't have that, right? So if there's no one to catch you when you fall, things happen really, really quickly. Okay. And the next thing you know, you're homeless, right? So homelessness is extremely complex, yes. And I just think that that's one of the challenges is truly trying to identify and tailor the services to the unique needs of not even a group, just every individual. Every human's going to have a different pathway out of homelessness, right? And ultimately, and all of them are not going to have a pathway out, but ultimately that's kind of the work that we do is try to identify, give them that voice, identify what that pathway is, and help them get there.
For sure.
What would you say?
Well, you summed it up really good. Yeah, I think a big part of it, I think that folks often forget, and I say folks as in like neighbors, community, folks that don't necessarily do this work day in and day out, we often forget that, these are our grandmas, our grandpas, our sisters, brothers, someone's kid out here, right? And the more you do this work and meet with folks one-on-one, the more you actually realize that you can be very close to also being in the same situation, depending on the event or the trauma or the experience that you might be going through. A lot of the folks that I meet day in and day out, there's a lot of childhood trauma that happens, a lot of lack of safety net of support and just services that you can tell was probably needed in childhood or during school or when they were in foster care or just in youth, right? Young adults. And then it just starts the cycle of morphing into the impact as when they're an adult, right? And so I think we just need to always remember the complexity of it, yes, like what Colin was saying, but also just that they're our neighbors too, and that I think what's always helped me continue doing what I'm doing is really those connections that I've made with people, hearing their stories and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get you to that next step? How do I create a positive step for you to take so that we can get you out of the situation that we're in, right? Whether or not you're quote unquote ready for it, whether or not you have all of these other barriers like mental health needs, substance use needs, all of these things, right? How do I create an opportunity for you that you're going to want to take that next step for yourself?
Engagement.
Yeah, engagement. Yeah.
Complexity, but also simplicity.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we often have people like, how do you work with homeless people? And it's like, these are humans. They're just human beings, right? This is how you work with them. What you just say hi, right? Like, hey, they're human. There's a lot of people and you're not even aware of it. You just have this ability to other this group, right? They're homeless. How many times would you define yourself as being, like, how often have you had you guys are young, but how often have you ever thought of a conversation that someone being housed, well, they live in a house. How often does that ever mean anything about whether or not you like someone, whether or not they're cool? It's just something you don't, have you ever said, well, that person lives in a house? Have you ever said that?
No,
Never.
absolutely not.
Is it just like the visible difference, that's just...
And that's where we start with this population, right? They're immediately, we're already othering them we're not saying they're not humans, but they're homeless. Like, they're so much more than that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's literally
like the
just
comparison with us or just as people, and then the idea that they're less than or they're unequal to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of it is not even, it's just what's not said, right? It's just that, like, well, they're homeless, so.
And like, as like, a kid, would you say it's a lot of like parents as well, like that kind of just feed into this like chain of people seeing houseless people as unequal?
Oh, good question. As a parent, what would you say?
That's tough.
I know.
Or just someone with any say to a child or anything.
Yeah. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong too, right? I'm just trying to think back. I think that oftentimes, even whether it's parent to child, whether it's peer to peer, the more that you talk about something in a way where there is some sort of negative spin on it, or you have a very, I don't know, just got a very direct opinion around, or a very like explicit opinion around like homelessness or the othering, that just feeds, right? It just feeds into that kid. It feeds into my friendship or peer to peer, right? And so, but then when you don't take that next step to find out if what someone is saying is true, right? You're left with, okay, well, I guess that is true. So I also believe that, or I'm also just going to spew the same statements or sentiments that my mom, dad, friend is saying as well. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. If your parents are telling you something, it's going to bleed down to you, and you're going to be like, okay, that's my normal, right? So that's my baseline, is that all homeless people are drug addicts. Well, isn't that true? I mean, the amount of friends that we have that are even still adults that still are just truly uneducated. There's literally an education around homelessness that has just not happened for a majority of adults, right? Because for one reason or another, right? They don't care. Maybe they do care, but they just don't want to explore it. It's icky. Homelessness is not, it's hard to wrap your arms around it, right? So, yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, preconceived notions can be pretty dangerous. This is a good segue, I think, for the next question, which is why are hateful attitudes towards the homeless so widely accepted in our society?
Oh, that's a good one. And I think Colin had touched on this earlier, but I think part of it is, well, two things. One, the lack of just understanding, like I had mentioned as well, right? The lack of like really education around really like understanding the root causes of homelessness, right? Whether that's DV, whether that's other, right? That we've talked about, but also this, I don't know, I really like this conversation around, I think, the othering that Colin was mentioning as well, right? I think it's much easier, as Lulu was pointing out too, around the visibility. When you visibly see something on the street that kind of is icky, right? That you might think is icky, or your example around like, where do folks go? Did they get services? Were they just kicked off? Like what's going on here? I think it's just easier for folks to other at the end of the day when you don't understand, right? Being naive in the sense and not being educated and not doing this work really, it's just a whole lot easier to say, well, this is someone else's problem and they should be doing something for themselves, right? I think we've all had that feeling before, right? Whether it's from the community, whether it's from parents as well, oftentimes, right? Is like, you guys should be able to figure it out, right? Pick yourselves up by the bootstraps, right? And so should this adult that's living on the street. Why don't they just go get a job, right? And naively thinking that you have all the answers to a very complex problem, right? When you don't know what their barriers might be to that next step. So it's just a lot easier to just paint and brush everybody and go, yeah, they're these folks that we just don't have to deal with, but they also just got to figure it out, right? They're not motivated enough, I think, is oftentimes what I hear. Yeah.
So
wait, hold on just a second. So I just want to go back to something that you mentioned, but like hit home on it a little bit more. I think a lot of the ways that you can really lift people out, to your question, out of homelessness, but also it is just really key is this engagement part, right? And like truly meeting people where they're at, whether that's in physical locations, like deep encampments in the woods, right? To meeting families that are residing in their vehicles, right? And in a random parking lot or on a random street, right? And physically providing them services for where they're at and talking to them about what are your needs, what are your biggest barriers to housing, things like that. How long have you been out here for? And so a lot of that then translates into a lot of the work that we do, right? And that helps us come up with strategies, recommendations, what the plans are to actually build services and programs that truly meet where folks are at on their journey towards stability.
Yeah, totally. And I think examples of that, to Stephanie's point of meeting them where they're at, it can look a lot of different ways. And I can give you examples of things that we've done around the state, from Tacoma to Olympia to Spokane to other cities, other states, right? So an example is truly the first step would be something I would call a mitigation site, where you truly are mitigating human suffering. So you think of the person on the sidewalk on cardboard, right? Where can we literally just want to mitigate the suffering in that. So example here in Tacoma, I set up down in the port, a piece of property nobody wanted to use. I can use it. So we set up a managed outdoor site, brought in portable toilets, brought in hand washing stations, and got these individuals down to the site, gave them a tent, very basic, but truly it's called a mitigation site. We are just truly trying to mitigate the human suffering at that point. The goal for what we do truly is creating flow, right? So that's kind of like step one. The equivalent would also be a shelter, right? But there's a reason why there's vacancies at shelters every night. People don't want to go in there. They don't want to follow the rules maybe. So let's meet them where they're at. Mitigation site. When the mitigation site, the first thing you want to do always is try to get people to stabilize, right? So now we're looking at a stabilization site. Stabilization site, I've set them up. There's one down on the corner of Puyallup Ave and Portland Ave right now in Tacoma that I set up. It's a giant tent that you've probably driven by and said, what is that giant white tent, right? That's where people live, right? So that's a stability site. I also set up a really cool stability site in the city of Olympia, right in the middle of downtown on a parking lot. Stability sites are like that next step up from a mitigation site. That's a managed outdoor site. They may have tiny houses there. There's a little bit more accountability there. It's secure. There's access control on that. And once again, all those human needs, the basic human needs. Where do I go to the bathroom is something that you may think about in between periods, but honestly, that's a daily grind for these individuals, right? So just that simply alone is a huge thing. And then you can go into, and I could go on, but tiny house villages. We've all seen the little tiny houses. We've started many of those partnerships with faith-based organizations. They're one of our key partners that we use. Safe parking program. There, you would not believe the amount of people at your guys' school that very well may be living in a car, right, with their family, right, and you have no idea around it. So where do those cars go at night? Where do moms with children safely park? Can you imagine the only thing, you're just a dark corner, a dark alley, right? That's probably the safest place. So we've created safe parking programs, partnered with faith-based organizations, with cities. It's real simple. It's just a parking lot, all right? But it's safe. Police don't mess with you. Police love these things too. So those are examples of things that we do.
Yeah.
We also do lots employment stuff also. So I'll stop there.
I think a lot of the benefits with those like managed outdoor sites or safe parking programs and things like that is oftentimes there are laws, policies throughout the cities that prohibit the loitering, right? Prohibit parking on the streets for X amount of time. And so oftentimes these families, let's just say you're parking, right, somewhere on a street, are often having to move from block to block to block. And so a lot of these sites really create an opportunity for folks to just find a bit of stability, a little bit of safety, and just where they sleep at night. And then what's really cool on the other side of things as a service provider and someone that provides direct service to these folks is like, I know where they're going to sleep, so I also know I can meet them there at 8 o'clock in the morning so that we can work on getting their documentation together. We can start calling Social Security. We can start, getting their kids enrolled in this other school. Like, there's so much more opportunity that happens when it's safely managed, right? When we can actually give folks a humane opportunity and space to sleep, right?
So for all the listeners out there, whether that be teenagers like ourselves or, full grown-ups, what can we do with the resources available to help I2 Strategies with their work?
That's a good question. What you can do, whether it's helping I2 Strategies or just helping out in your community, is really volunteer, And as I said earlier, educate yourself. Learn, right? Do things like you're doing right now. Talk to people. In this area, hop on the Tacoma-Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness, right? They do every Friday morning. You guys should be in school, obviously, but they have a meeting, right? They also archive those meetings. It's just like a Zoom meeting, but you can hop on and you can just find out, hey, is there anything that the reason why I do what I do is passion, right? So is there anything that is grabbing at your passion? I have a passion for this work. That's the only reason I do it. If I didn't have a passion, I would not have a company, right? So what do you feel drawn to? Is it after school programs with children? Is it 2 blocks up the road, there is a youth shelter, right? For youth. Is it helping out at the youth shelter? So I think there's lots of opportunities like that. And then I would say when it's safe, talk to someone that's experiencing homelessness, right? But don't put yourself in a bad position. But when you have those opportunities, and rather than ignore them, look at them. Say, hey, that's it. That's truly what you can do.
That's such a huge one, I would say. Like looking at somebody in the eye and smiling. To me, that's always been the best thing. Like, even if I'm walking on the street, I'm always trying to make eye contact, especially if somebody is experiencing homelessness. Just to offer up somebody a smile, I think is huge. I think to add a bit more on what you guys could do too, since y'all are on social media so much. When you hear, right? But when you hear or you see TikToks or you go on Instagram and you see some really cool videos on things happening within the city, right? Getting involved in, in city council meetings, right? Really like informing yourselves and educating yourselves on the policies being implemented in your city is really important, because a lot of the voices that I'll say trump the other voices that we want to raise up and elevate are the negative ones, the naysayers, the not in my neighborhood, the no, we don't need more for the others, right? These people, right? What we need more voices about is no, we do need more, right? We need the voices of people that are also passionate, but also care about the community to say, this policy is probably not the best, right? Or, can we do more? Can we provide more services? Can we provide more funding? Can we be a bit more flexible, right? Can we do more safe parking programs? That works. And so just making sure that to always remember that you have a voice, and to be educated and to dig a little deeper when you see those videos pop up on your feed, right? Just dig a little deeper, and then have your voices be heard. I think is really important that you often forget. Yeah.
Colin and Stephanie, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And remember, your future isn't found, it's forged. Keep pushing, keep growing, and keep defining your destiny. Until next time.